Luxury goods, employer brands, and the illusion of a job market. How online hiring efficiently delivers employment identity but neglects hiring outcomes. Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull. I'm the founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective, the first anonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. It's a level of go-to-market awareness as well as public service for all the gaslighting out there. This comes from my Substack, which I also do in this video format and audio format on places like Spotify and Apple Playlists, Apple Podcasts, as well as Substack and YouTube, because, you're trying to meet people where they are. I'm driving at a paradigm shift, which is really just baseline for other markets, like bi-directional feedback user reviews. But, you have to start somewhere. And when you're trying to change people's approach to something, do category creation, you need to, do a lot of education. You need to offer people an explanation for why your product is valuable, what you bring to the table. So that's what I'm doing. Starting from the beginning. The identity market you never knew existed. Imagine a clothing store where the shelves are always full, customers keep coming in, but almost nothing ever leaves. No discounts, no sales, no adjustment to price or supply. Instead, the store concludes there aren't enough quality customers appreciating the items on display for their full worth yet. Absurd, yeah? Unless this isn't a normal store. Unless it's a luxury store. The luxury stores aren't really selling the functionality of the item. They're selling the importance of being associated with a brand. Failure to move a product doesn't signal inefficiency. It signals that the customer wasn't able to appreciate the hand stitching and the marketing didn't reach the appropriate clientele. Purchasing this product isn't really about the functionality of the purse, but about the identity and status achieved by being lucky enough now to get to own it. This framing explains nearly everything that has gone wrong in online hiring. This isn't just inefficiency, it's structural extraction, and it has consequences, economic, social, and legal, that go far beyond the individual actors. Who this is for? People who know the labor market is failing but struggle to name why. Small businesses unable to raise wages because they're being priced out by the status games being played in this abattoir masquerading as the labor market. Systems thinkers, economists, technologists, and organizers who sense the contradictions. Anyone who has watched smart institutions make decisions that clearly cause harm to even them and been told it was strategy. This is not a rant, it's a category correction, a framework to see the system for what it is and to begin thinking about accountability and change. Clearing markets versus identity markets. I want to introduce a distinction between two types of markets that operate very differently in the modern economy. The terminology is my own, it's a systems twist on economics, but the behaviors map cleanly onto established principles in the field. First, clearing markets. Most markets are clearing markets. Purpose is simple, to move goods and services efficiently. In clearing markets, if inventory doesn't sell, prices adjust. You get, the prices decrease or they increase depending. Feedback loops correct behavior. Unsold goods are information, not a moral judgment. Failure to clear signals mispricing, mismatched, or changed demand. The system is designed to learn. Adaptation is not a threat, it's the mechanism. Identity markets. The first type, think of Fish Fry Fridays or dinner specials. Those are clearing markets. The same as half off Tuesdays at a store, or quarters 10% sale. Weekly paper does Wednesday sales maybe. It depends on the situation, but all of those are clearing markets. Identity markets. Some markets operate on a fundamentally different logic. Luxury brands, economists will classify many of these as the blend goods, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm saying that fully right, but they're the clearest example of what I would call an identity market. In identity markets, the product's value is treated as intrinsic to the brand. Public failure to sell is attributed to the buyer, the moment, or the audience, not the product. Status preservation matters more than clearance. A Gucci bag does not go half off because demand softened. That's not how it works. At least publicly, the brand does not ask whether the product or the price was wrong. The explanation is externalized. The market wasn't ready, the audience wasn't aligned, the season shifted, or competitors distorted perception. Consumers who participate in these markets are often aware in the abstract that a functionally similar product could be purchased for far less, but that knowledge is compartmentalized. The value proposition is not utility, it's membership. Why the hiring market stopped adapting. When hiring moved online, incentives inverted. In the newspaper era, the pre-digital job market, employers paid each time they posted a role. There was no, SaaS, software as a service listings or free job ads. The newspaper cared about clean signal. Misleading or low-quality postings imposed direct costs on hiring intermediaries. Revenue for the newspaper was tied to trust. Therefore, non-clearance wasn't really on the table. Didn't even occur. It wasn't an issue. The online platform era. With the rise of online hiring platforms, the model changed. Applicant attention and time became the primary revenue engine. Job postings became content rather than transactions. Misleading or low-quality roles no longer imposed costs, they generated revenue via engagement. Platforms were structurally distanced from the users that drove their revenue in a way that newspapers never were. I mean, think about regionally located newspapers. If you're going to hire in Eau Gray, Michigan, you're going to put it in an Eau Gray, Michigan newspaper. They're located together. Now, if you're going to hire in Eau Gray, Michigan, you're going to use Recruit Holdings from Japan through Indeed, which might be through the Texas version of Indeed, whatever. There's different offices, but they're definitely not located regionally. They're not accountable in the same way, even structurally. Failure to clear those matches was no longer a problem. It was neutral and often profitable. Employers began to treat free job ads as brand visibility because bad signals were no longer negatively impacting talent vendors. Evergreen roles, reposted listings, and aspirational postings created noise that kept applicants cycling through the system. Markets rewarded throughput, not resolution. This affiliation with brand further reinforced structural similarities with luxury markets. Job boards started hosting certain employers the way department stores approach hosting certain luxury brands. The act of having Amazon post roles for you was equivalent to getting Gucci to sell in your stores, or like having Brad Pitt be in a B-level movie. It doesn't matter if the movie is good or not. Brad Pitt was there, right? You don't have to pay money to acquire users or write a good script or any of that stuff if you acquire the customer, the person that you want there to pull the users come with them. You derive revenue from the captured users acquired by playing nice with the brand, employer brand. What was once a labor market that ran on trust became a labor market that ran on trust theater because talent vendors cultivated trust with the people who wrote checks while structurally denying it to the users that drove their revenue. At the same time, employers who had historically shared an identity group with the hiring intermediaries now interacted with platforms that had no reciprocal obligation to the workforce supplying the value. The labor side became an input, not a constituency. What the newspapers lost money for doing was neutral or profitable to online talent platforms. Predictable outcomes. Once incentives inverted, the results were not accidental. There was no pressure to improve matching. There was no urgency to examine the job seeker experience. Broken user experience did not trigger correction, it sustained engagement. This was driven by structure and context, but it was still an active design. Maintaining plausible deniability, the ability to say, we didn't know, was sufficient. In an identity market, the goal is not clearance, it's preserving the assumption that the goods on display are inherently valuable, and that those who fail to purchase them are the problem. The proof lies in the design logic. If job seekers were either the stakeholders or the product of the online labor market, user experience insight would be required. That's how you ensure contract renewal with a vendor, or you optimize efficient delivery of your product. It's just what it is. 1 + 1 is 2, Yet consider this. The companies using these platforms, from the 11,000 stores on Workday to 98% of Fortune 500 firms using some version of an ATS, or the millions posting on LinkedIn, are by all other measures competent businesses. They understand efficiency and contract renewal. They're very aware of it. What if for 25 years, these systems have been delivering the product purchased efficiently, just not the product they claim to sell? A real-world analogy, identity versus stated purpose. Think about college football. Fans buy Michigan jerseys and attend games ostensibly for the football. They're huge fans. But they leave in the second quarter when the score's too high or it's too low, and they don't buy tickets in seasons when the team's losing frequently. The identity was already delivered with the jersey. The stated purchase, watching football, is secondary. The parallel I'm making: what if we suppose the market design of online hiring has been delivering a product efficiently? Identity. It delivers affiliation with a particular employment approach that makes you a reasonable and worthwhile employer. But when it comes to online hiring, perhaps the justification for the purchase is increasingly struggling to be delivered. A bit like a football team that used to be a winner and is increasingly losing. The problem is that employers' base need is identity, with a secondary need for a talent match. But job seekers' base need is survival, with a secondary need for identity. The market meets one base need by ransoming the other. That's why the employed find job seekers' desperation dramatic. Their survival was never at stake. And why their base need was already being met. And why workers see institutional silence as epic social betrayal. By all existing research and lived experience openly stated, it's the definition of a market that runs without trust for the people who drive all of its revenue. The publicly available fiscal year reports don't hide it. Employers, academics, and policymakers knew the implications. They had training to anticipate the civic consequences. All academic data confirmed the harm, and it was ignored structurally. They continued to buy into systems to hire people in a way that structurally harmed Americans' ability to access food, shelter, and healthcare at stochastic scale. For the very first time in modern history, the labor market ran on deference, outsourcing negative outcomes to the people most harmed, while structurally excluding those who could identify what needed to change from any ability to influence that reality. Basic data was never examined. Identity markets explain the silence around the institutional response to widespread economic harm. People do not meaningfully question their own identity unless forced. With job seekers' voice structurally erased when the market went online, nothing forced them. They can theoretically do so, but doubt is rarely operationalized. In luxury markets, for example, the possibility that a purse might not justify its price or that the brand might be misaligned is almost never treated as real. There's always an external justification: craftsmanship, the quality of materials, or narrative prestige, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Applied to hiring, millions, 27 million from hidden workers in 2021, and it was only growing, of excluded workers were treated as noise. Noise, not signal. Platform incentives were rarely scrutinized. Structural harm did not trigger inquiry, only professionalization, curiosity. Oh, it's an interesting thing. 27 million people can't find steady work. It's nothing to do with me. Efficiency frameworks like Calder-Hicks optimality were evoked. Ooh, that's a hard one to live down. Implicitly endorsing unpaid labor of the U.S. labor force. Yikes, you know? It is a question, really, of what is thinkable within the frame, what the system allows us to consider as meaningful evidence. When you've already decided the workforce can't be trusted, you stop noticing when you've built a radium growth situation at scale, extracting value while externalizing harm onto the people generating it. Worse than radium girls, because the people generating it were not paid. By direction, they also would get their jaws falling off either. So I don't know. Still, regardless, why bidirectional feedback never appeared. Every functional online two-sided market relies on feedback. Buyers rate sellers, sellers rate buyers, reputation, disciplines, behavior on both sides. It's not confusing. That is a wild red flag. Wild red flag that this was already market distortion. Hiring platforms didn't just reject this model. It never even occurred to them. Never even occurred. Not publicly, at least. In an identity market, feedback is asymmetric. Only one side holds legitimate status. If only one party is considered authoritative, then only that side's perspective matters. The other side, applicants, become data exhaust. Experiences are buried, memory is erased. This is not accidental, it is structural. People who do game theory are just dying here, I'm sure. Like, oh, what are you talking about? This is such a bad idea. Because it is. It also helps explain the massive amounts of white labeling across the market, and thus the mediocrity of HR tech. When vendors white label, they demonstrate that they believe they are only accountable to the people who buy their products, not the ones whose time, energy, and activities drive their revenue. Job seekers are the captive workforce whose unpaid time and energy they are entitled to, not stakeholders whose needs they must meet to renew contracts. Yeah, I mean, there's only one conclusion for what white labeling is at this scale. That's what it is. Why smart people thought they were strategic. Within an identity market frame, Econ 101 level errors of basic two-sided market collapse appear rational, even strategic. ATS systems non-converging Nash equilibria filtering seems necessary. After all, you aren't just any brand. You are the type of employer everyone wants to reach. The impact on the other stakeholder, the job seeker, isn't considered because within the identity frame, there is no other real actor. Come on. You're the actor. It does happen in a two-sided online market. ATS systems are very much acre lost lemons meets Nash non-converging. Yeah, it's what it is. Evergreen rules. Acre lost market for lemons. Posting rules indefinitely isn't market pollution. It's simply fulfilling a perceived customer need. With only one stakeholder in mind, the harm to applicants is invisible. One-click apply and AI screening, which is a Jevons paradox. AI improves the throughput for the singular market stakeholder. The goal is to make it easier for applicants to engage, but nicer for employers to experience. Again, the user experience that matter are the only users that matter, not the users that drive the revenue, the checkbooks that pay for it. Users that drive the revenue, they're just the unpaid workforce we're entitled to. Each of these moves protects the identity structure even as it steadily sends termites through the foundations of the global markets, economic markets, depresses wages across the workforce, erodes economic stability across the country and civic safety. Strategy inside the frame is self-sabotage outside of it. It's just delayed horizon, but you're still shooting your own self in the foot. What there really is, it's an economic oil rig. An identity market, labor market functions like an oil rig, drilled into the foundations of the economy. It extracts time, attention, emotional labor, unpaid work, data, and hope. Value flows upward to platforms, intermediaries, and reputational centers, while costs are externalized across millions of workers. It actively destroys the talent within the market itself. It's openly destructive. It doesn't need clearance, it needs throughput. That's how the system remains stable while hollowing itself out. Check the research. This framing builds on my academic work examining online markets as structural systems, general economic theory. I also put in acre loft, market for lemons, Rashid's rule, platform competition, and two-sided markets. My own analysis, I put in filtering versus matching, frame monopoly, and how online hiring plays Jenga with the economy, a job market for lemons, the three roles of online job seekers, laws of online hiring, two axioms and one corollary. Across all of them, through line is clear. The relational integrity is infrastructure, not sentiment. Why T-job exists. The job applicant perspective exists to do one thing the identity market could not: store bidirectional feedback. Job seekers are not. The American workforce is not the unpaid workforce earning access to identity from talent vendors. I don't think so. They are the customers purchasing job ads with their time. That's what labor is. You purchase value with your time. That's what it always is. If talent vendors can't handle that, they don't get to be talent vendors. That's it. Talent vendors earn job seeker approval in order to get renewed contracts from employers. That's it. That's what you do if you want to stay employed. I mean, there's no doubt there's going to be a wild amount of class action lawsuits on contingency for this entire behavior this last 25 years. But if you want to continue to stay in business, that's what you do. When hiring intermediaries fail, they lose contracts. Attention moves elsewhere. Employers follow outcomes, not optics. That's how clearing markets work, not through punishment, through memory, signal, and choice game theory. When you have economics, actual economics, game theory, information theory, systems theory, cybernetics, HCI, when all of that says the exact same thing, we should listen. It's not really me saying it. It's everybody saying it. When William Jevons, John Nash, and George Akerlof would roll over in their graves if they could at the way that you have designed a market. You got some stuff to think on, And in the end, when job seekers evaluate the market, they don't need employers' approval. Who cares what you think, In the end, they evaluate and they warn each other about the biggest dragons. They start giving attention to each other Employers will come eventually, but first they'll be able to avoid the biggest dragons, and then they'll avoid the slightly smaller dragons, and then they'll avoid slightly smaller dragons, and then by the end of it, they're avoiding the kittens of the labor market, But they have to start out by avoiding the biggest dragons, and by the time they get to the kittens, employers would be posting in a place like this anyway. That's it, They pull the market into line because it is an attention economy, and as long as you have a vendor who's willing to meet the needs of the job-seeking stakeholders, employers will come. You start with a really high user acquisition cost. You bring your user acquisition costs almost to nothing. Employers will come. Your customer acquisition cost is almost nothing. And you don't need to meet their approval. You still need to meet their needs because you have to treat them rationally, make sure that job seekers can't gamify that side too. Because it's not like we're all not just people, but still, it's very doable. As long as you know, systems. Closing, this isn't radical. Markets that erase one side's experience eventually collapse under their own noise. Markets that preserve memory adapt. Yeah. Game theory. It's not confusing. It's straightforward. The labor market doesn't need more filtering. It needs symmetry. Gucci doesn't have to clear. Labor markets do. We forgot which one we're building. The social, psychological, economic, and civic harm of organizing a labor market this way will be studied for generations, no doubt. The question is whether institutions will keep curating people or they finally start clearing talent matches, Thanks. Yeah, that's it. Not really sure if I love that last line, but yeah, I'm running with it for now. Regardless, you guys get the point. Yeah. As long as you have a talent vendor actually willing to meet the needs of the end users instead of people, it's just Disney World. Feeling like they don't have to sell the kids, please the kids in order to sell tickets to the parents. And in fact, the longer they don't please the kids, the more tickets they sell to the parents. And the parents are just mad at the kids instead of mad at Disney World for not building a park that the kids need. As long as you recognize who your actual users are and where you should be driving your revenue, you're going to make a lot of revenue. And the online hiring does not have to be a gladiator pit. It could be a community like gaming. As long as you're comfortable selling talent matches, not identity, you could actually still deliver engagement without having a gladiator pit. You can still deliver massive amounts of engagement for revenue, but also deliver talent matches too. Both are possible. You just have to want to not sell identity. That's the idea. Anyway, please follow and share and repost and just engage. We'd love to have you. Also, challenge me. I like a good challenge. I actually really enjoy this marketplace. It is fascinating. It's such a magnificent dragon. It's really beautiful in all of its horribleness. I feel a little bit like Muldoon with the Velociraptor. So, even if it's going to get me, I kind of admire it for its beauty. But I like puzzles. It's been a magnificent puzzle, the best one I've encountered as of yet. But we'll find out if I can convince other people to see the puzzle my way. That's the challenge. It is a very nice challenge, though. I love intellectual stimulation. It's fun. Anyway, thank you very much, and I hope you guys are all kind and nice to each other. Empathy isn't really about softness. It's about data integrity over long places, and in general, we don't need to have money to have each other, do we? Yeah? Even though she ain't got money. That isn't it. Anyway, you got to stop. Have a good one out there.